Is it about some new managerial methods? The answer to all this is no. In fact, a number of methods have been in vogue for quite a long time, for the past 3-4 decades. It is only about integrating all of them, putting them together. What has been available as silos of information is now being put together and presented. And now when you embed that with analytics like regression, correlation, clustering, segmentation, then it becomes extremely important. So EPM is not something new. It is only an integration of all the managerial methods which have been in vogue for quite some time. The problem is we all operate in silos, and by that I mean the finance function in particular, the finance and accounting function. So this is something we have to look at. As Sir was mentioning, there needs to be a behavioral shift, a paradigm shift for this to work out. We have got to move out of our area and interact more with the other teams, operations, maintenance, sales and marketing, sourcing. So this is something we have got to look at in the long run. So it is not just about the CFO's organization, it is also the integration of all the often siloed functions like marketing, operations, sales and strategy. Right? So what is the role of CFO here or the finance function? It is not just monitoring the dials. It is something more. Right? We actually move the dials. The CFO no longer is a bean counter. He is what we call as a bean grower. He has got to move the dial and not just follow the dial. This is what I would like to emphasize here. So, the question emerges, are CFOs vanguards or villains? Right. Again, I am a bit critical, forgive me for that. Right. It is food for thought before we have our actual dinner. Right. Are CFOs vanguards or villains? What is a vanguard, sir? There's a small definition below. The vanguard is a leading part of a military formation to scout and secure ground in advance for the main force. I always give this example. See, all of us would have been involved in developing our annual plans now. Most of our budgets should have been approved by now, right? And all of them lose their relevance the moment April comes. But you would have spent almost 5 months developing it from September, October onwards. Lot of revisions, lot of changes, a lot of percentage work where we have to cut, how to cut, all this happens. And by the time April comes, the budget's relevance is lost. For the ground scenario, something else. I always liken it to an artillery barrage. So most wars, if you see, the enemy is sitting on the other side. The enemy here is my competitor. And there's a huge barrage going from our side. We simply bombard them. By that barrage, I mean the amount of time and effort we spend on developing these budgets and other stuff. By the time our actual operations, marketing and other teams try to enter that area of the enemy, they are simply cut down. Reason is, most of our barrage is highly ineffective. Despite all the noise and sound that it raises, unfortunately it has not done its job of putting the enemy down before we embark. This is something which we have to think of what value is the information that we generate from finances side. Something we have to ponder about and why this is happening. So this is what we will be seeing in subsequent slides. So actually, if the CFO, if the accounting function is a vanguard, right, then they should have scouted properly, directed the fire properly, and ensured that the operations and marketing team do not suffer when they actually come face to face with the enemy. So that is what is expected of the new age CFO. There is a bread and butter here. I will come to this bread and butter later on. There is a message behind this bread and butter. Why do I tell that We are more villains than vanguards. Right? You just think of our typical monthly review. I may be wrong, but this is based on my experience of 25 years. I have reviewed some 150 companies, approximately in auto ancillary alone. What I find is every monthly review meeting, the operations team, the top management is presented with the PL. Then you have the inventory data, number of times turnover, that we have reduced this, that all this stuff is being discussed. All the expenses are presented as a percentage of sales. Right? Is this logical? Now, for example, let me take power cost. Power cost are consumables or tools. This is a often discussed area. Oh, the tooling cost for this month has increased drastically. Next month it has fallen. And it is shown as a percentage. Now, this data typically is in the accountant's language. Right? We tell material percentage, labor percentage, consumables percentage, power percentage. And expect the operations guy to clarify why it has gone up or come down. The best thing that he can do is give some vague explanation. Sir, this month power cut is more. We have used more of generated power. We could not dig properly for a private purchase. But then this may not be the reason. Because you are not speaking in his language. Now, how do we speak in his language, sir? Then the data that is presented should be from an activity perspective, not from an elemental perspective. Sir was talking about value chain, about areas other than manufacturing. Are we in a position today to present our accounting data from a value stream perspective, which is nothing but capturing it end to end, right from my sourcing, working with my vendor, and up to delivery to the customer? Are we in a position to show the accounting data in that order instead of from an elemental? Yes, element is required, but then can we tell what is the cost of sourcing? What is the cost of power in a particular activity? We aren't doing that. We give data on our terms and then expect operations to clarify why something has gone up and come down. Of course, we do a lot of covering up. Like for this month, we have increased, we have received a prospective increase. So do not take that into account. Material cost, we have given our supply a retrospective increase. So please remove it. Exchange fluctuation, remove it. We do all this stuff, but still we are not talking in his language. And that I feel is the greatest lacuna with our system, and which we need to address in a good enterprise performance management system. We need to speak in the language of the operations team. The next aspect, and that is what hurts me as a cost accountant, for a pretty long time I have been facing this, is our highly flawed system of allocation. What is this flawed system of allocation? Our accountants are very particular about valuing inventory. Right? Second is, wherever the term audit comes in, we are very careful. Right? So cost audit, typically, what happens? Somehow the butter represents the cost, the bread represents the product, customer combination, customer product combination. Our idea is somehow all the costs have got to be transferred onto the bread. But on what basis? We are still in the days of Taylor and Fayol and Ford. Method study, motion study, time study. So single base for us is machine cycle time, man cycle time. Why? Because that is the only measure that we have readily. Be it JD Edwards, be it Quada Pro, be it SAP, be it Oracle. We have not moved beyond Fayol and Taylor. We are entirely dependent on them. But then this is highly flawed in today's environment. Why? For example, R&D. Is it a cost? I want your answer, sir. R&D is a cost? Is it to be charged to product? Is R&D a cost or an investment?
Investment.
But then why do you consider it as a cost? Because income tax requires it. Our cost audit report still costs R&D. It is an investment. We are always under the false illusion that if a machine is fully depreciated, product cost also comes down. We do not consider replacement cost. We are considering historical cost. Now, how is this correct? Is this causal? We are fundamentally flawed principle, right? The problem is we want to have a single source of truth. And that single source of truth we feel is the accounting data, which definitely it is not. Accounting data is meant for the outsider, for our banks, for our creditors. For managerial decisions, we should definitely not rely on accounting information. But then what happens is, generating this itself seems to be a Himalayan task. On top of it, having multiple sources means CFOs catch cold feet. Right? So they think 2 books, reconciliation, very big headache. Why at all enter into this stuff? So the convenient way is stop with inventory valuation. Many companies I go, they tell we have data at gross margin levels. What is gross margin? Sales minus material cost. Or at most a couple of more elements which have been defined as variable expenses. What is this gross margin? Would that be sufficient in today's environment? Where are we capturing expenses along our value stream? But that is what companies have, despite being on SAP S4 HANA or whatever system, other systems you have, Oracle, right? They are all virtually the same in this regard. Why is it so? This is something we have to look at. The flawed allocation models that we follow today, right? Why is it so? We will see shortly. And what would be the benefits if we follow a better model? That also we will be seeing. So, why do CFOs hold back? Financial accounts dominates over managerial. Throughout the year, we have audits to keep us busy. So, where is the question of serving our internal customers? Misconception of complexity. The moment 2 sets, even I was surprised when S4 HANA came out. Right? The first thing they told was, we have a universal journal and it's a single source of truth, which means they are doing away with most of the costing functionality and they are ensuring that financial data is the costing data also. It is claimed that S4 HANA will come out with one single source of truth, which in fact is compromising on the SAP functionality. Right? Anyway, more about it perhaps in a later seminar. So why does all this matter? Why am I championing the cause of having a more causal basis? It is because, as Sir told, companies are shifting from a product to customer-centric position, and competitive edge flows from increasingly differentiated services to more granular and micro-segmented customers. It is no longer about improving the top line. This was a fad about 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Top line grows, fixed cost remains same, automatically my bottom line will improve. No, it will not improve. It cannot. So it is about growing not just the top line but also the bottom line. It is about profitable sales and not just top line growth. And the biggest peril that we face is our inability to trace expenses to channels and customers. We will be looking at customer profitability shortly. We will discuss that next one. So what is this? What are the dimensions in EPM? I would say that we are still stuck in this area. We have not moved beyond this. COGS and inventory valuation. And this we feel is management accounting. Sorry. This is just for your external reporting. The real domain where we have got to work, where we have got to focus is here and here. This is the post-mortem part, this is the predictive part, which is performance evaluation and analysis, all your profitability reporting, process perspective of cost, learning, corrective actions, cost improvements, all those. And here is the predictive part. Our budgets, if they are to be fruitful, they have to be driven based on the activities performed. If you cannot budget your way to cost reduction, sir, unless it is based on an activity base. People think this year the cost is 10% of sales. Next year I have to target 9%. It will never work. It is like putting the cart before the horse. You cannot percentage your way to cost reduction. No. You have to attack the way activities are performed. It is these activities which are then consumed by your products and customers. So if you do not target the activity which is the source of your resource consumption, you are bound to fail in your cost reduction. Cost cutting, yes, you may cut your way, but it is not sustainable. It goes this way, comes via another door. That is what happens. People often tell employees, they are asked to leave, then they come back as consultants in a lot of companies. So cost cutting is like that, right? But cost reduction to be sustainable has got to be driven via the activity route. So this is what I was talking about earlier. We are still in our conventional costing. We have material. Of course, we are able to trace. Still, there is some difficulty in tracing that itself also for a lot of companies. Of course, labor, and then overheads. It's a single lump which is charged up to inventory load. The problem is we are still using this machine hours and man hours. Now, when the costs are largely moved out of the shop floor, how logical is it to use machine and man hours alone? Right? A typical cost structure for an auto company, 50 to 60% material, 40% is overheads, 50 to 40. Now what happens out of this 40, if you see, today 10 to 12% is on the shop floor, remaining is outside the shop. Right? But then we are using shop floor drivers to drive the cost, which is fundamentally flawed. So, will this not distort the costing in your environment? Yes, it will. Is there an alternative? Yes. That is activity-based costing. So, this is what Sir was talking about. What is the modern manufacturing philosophy? He was talking about being responsive, being flexible, being effective and not just efficient. There is a huge difference between the two. You might be locally efficient, but overall very ineffective. So effectiveness is about synergy, people getting together to get things done. So causality, this is what we were discussing about. I will just take a simple example of a die casting operations, right, to explain this. Typically, what does industry do? If you are a foundry or a pressure die casting guy, what base do you use to drive cost to the product? Answer, sir. What is the base you use? What driver do you use? Please.
Metric ton of production.
Metric ton. Typically, it is weight in kgs or tons. But let us just dissect this pressure die casting activity alone and see, is it so? Let us check for a moment. So typically what happens in a casting setup or a foundry setup? First of all, you have got to melt. Okay. So melting is an activity. Now what drives the cost of melting? Weight. Obviously the quantity that you melt. Next, what do? You mold or cast. Right? So what is the driver for this? For molding? Molding. What can be the driver? Is it weight?
Cycle time.
Time. Cycle time. Fine. But is it only time?
No. Short weight, cycle time.
Then
Tonnage.
when you change the molds, what is involved?
Changeover time.
Changeover times. No, honestly tell me, how many companies capture this changeover time? Not physically. Obviously, the department will be having the data in the sheet, OEE sheet they will be having. But do you use that as a cost driver? That is where the problem arises. Right? So setup, that may be the single most important driver of cost. But are we using it to drive the cost? Right? So let us move on. Let us go to shot blasting. What can be the driver of cost?
Cycle time.
It can be cycle time, it can be the surface area of the casting. Are we using that again? No. I haven't seen a single company use surface area as the driver. Is the data available? Very much. It can be part of your master itself, product master itself. Now come to designing of the mold. What has designing of the mold got to do with your cycle time or your weight? Invariably in the departments, casting departments, you have a team which is working on designing the die. Some companies have their own in-house tooling. Other companies give it to an outside supplier to develop. Right? Now what has weight or cycle time got to do with that? Are we capturing that data? We will tell, we amortize the cost of the tool. Fine. That is what you pay for the tool. But are we capturing at any point of time what is the amount of time spent, what is the manpower cost involved in designing the mold in the first place? Are we amortizing it along with the tooling cost? And if so, what has that got to do with any of your cycle time or weight? It has nothing to do with it. For second, TPM, TQM, name it, you have it. 5S. But then end of the day, how can we drive cost reduction if we are not telling the operator on the cost due to changeover? This is the cost impact of changeover. If I reduce the time by this much, then what would be the cost saving? Are we in a position to do as such the data that we provide as potential cost savings? Because this data is not being used. 3 minutes, let us say. Then what happens? It is not only reduction in the cost of setup and consequent product cost. It is also about improved capacity utilization. So is this data captured and given by finance? Answer is again no. Why? Because bread and butter. Our customer has ordered for a fat-free vegetable sandwich. But what? Activity-based costing, where factors other than volume, right? Like setup, design change, right? Is this data captured somewhere in our system? Answer is yes. Either manually, I haven't found a single factory which does not capture this. The problem is this data is in silos, as I told earlier, and we are not accessing it to drive our workings. In SAP, you have this concept called statistical key figures. How many of us are using it? A very simple example I will give. Number of invoices raised during the month. Can we not take that as a figure for our costing? Can we not use it to drive our marketing expenses to products and customers? Export invoices, how many are being processed? Local invoices, how many? Aftermarket, how many? Is this data not available? But are we using it? No. Simple single base sales value. So a customer to whom you sell more automatically will be charged with more of your administrative and selling expenses. Is that logical? We are simultaneously overcosting certain people and undercosting certain products and customers. And if this data is going to be used for decision making, think of the consequences. Is it fair? That is the question I posed to the audience. Right? Next one. So, what is it that we do in ABM? It is about cost management of activities, costing of objects other than products, the distribution channel, the customer, the entire value stream has got to be costed. Obviously, we go beyond gross margin. we look at customer profitability analysis, distribution channel profitability, which is becoming very important because of the pressures that the supply chain has been facing, and then strategic activity management. So, getting into customer profitability, sir. As I told, no longer product costing alone is not sufficient. No. This is something which we need to know. The top management needs to know which customers to retain, which customers to cultivate, which customers we need to push towards modifying their behavior, and which customers to ditch. It's a very hard decision, but nevertheless has to be taken, right? See, I had one client who used this customer profitability to decide on prioritizing his production. So, huge demand, unable to meet, which customers production request should I target first? He used a Pareto curve to actually decide. Those customers who are profitable, he prioritized. The use was different, but nevertheless, you can understand why customer profitability is important. Because there is a tendency that all customers are profitable, which is not the case in 99% of the times, right? So, typical merit curve, any customer profitability analysis you do, you find that 200% of your profit comes from 20% of your customers. The others, 60% generally they contribute to top line, but they don't have any great profitability. But top line is important. The remaining are actually pulling down your profit to your current level, 100%. Remaining 20, right? But do we have this data with us readily? That is the question. Real curve comes next, but do we have product and customer profitability on a monthly basis is the question, right? Yes. So why is it important? This customer profiling is extremely critical. All customers, similar products, they do not cost the same. The cost of serving a customer varies significantly. You, in auto ancillary, you will typically find companies, let us take Suzuki or Hyundai for example, right? They want on a just-in-time basis. Then you have tier 1 companies, if you are tier 2, or some other Indian company which is willing to accept supplies on a weekly basis. There are customers who want it to be delivered directly to their shop floor. There are customers who come and pick up from your factory. There are customers who at the drop of a hat immediately raise a debit note on you, line stoppage, right? And there are customers who understand the difficulty and okay, they allow for some leverage. So all the customers, do they cost the same? Answer is no. The cost to serve a customer varies significantly, and these are the distinguishing factors, right? Which customer costs high and which customer costs low to serve. Have we prepared a matrix along these lines is something we have got to think of. This is definitely a must, especially for auto ancillary companies. Right. So this is on the customer profitability side. Now let us come to the predictive part, right? Which is our budgeting, what if, scenario planning. We do lot of stuff as accountants. So here what do we look at, right? It is like, this is slightly different in the sense that resource planning. Yes, our budgeting process starts with the sales plan, and that gets modified over a number of times. Our costs also get accordingly modified. But then, how should our budgeting be done strictly? If you look at it, it should start with the number of planned cost objects, no doubt on that. Customer product expectation, computation of physical resources required, which is what we call as MRP2, manufacturing resources plan and material requirement plan. Now this should be from an activity based perspective. Unfortunately, it is here that we go wrong. What do? We typically start with the last year as the base, and then it's a percentage. plus bargaining capacity of different departments, right? Plus or minus to last year. Now, how does an increase in sale automatically allow for an increase in expense? As a percentage, if you put, definitely yes, that is what happens. But is it based on this? Answer is no. Lot of sound and fury, artillery fire, but then end of the day, it is not in line with reality. That is the problem. That is what ails our budgeting process. And that is what resource planning seeks to address. Right? Then, of course, once you have determined this, what is the cost of required resources, and then assigning it to the planned out. That is your standard or budgeted cost of product and customer. So, one example, we can share the presentation with all the participants, right? How resource planning works, right? So, for example, a very simple example, this is a warehouse. And let us say 4,000 per person, 20 people are there. So the cost is about 8 lakhs. Now each person works for about 10,560 minutes. Days converted into minutes. I take 75% of the time is available, effectively, practical capacity. Okay, 7,920. Right? So total capacity is 1,58,000 man minutes. Now the question is, for my projected demand, would this be sufficient or not? Let us say I define 3 activities in this warehouse. One is picking the parts. If needed by customer, special packing. If needed by customer, if it's an air shipment, then additional time. Right? 3 activities I am defining for the warehouse. Now, based on this, I also arrive at the cost per minute. Right? The cost divided by practical capacity. What do I have? 50 paise per minute, let us assume. So what happens here is, see at the end of it I find that this is what it will cost for operating at this level. What is different here from our traditional model? Can you find something which is different? What was our cost? It was 1,58,000 previously. 8 lakhs. And what was the time? 1,58,400. Next slide. What is the resource required? 1,45,000. Now, if we have a model like this, then what does it give? My capacity utilization is 92%. Right? So, what are the options available before the operations day? Can I ship some person to another area? Or in case there is a sudden increase in demand, should I retain 92% and provide a buffer for that? What if there is a surge? Should I go for overtime? Right? This sort of analysis is what we need to do in the operations. And above all, the cost that I allocate, right? I divide by practical, not by actual. It is not bread and butter. I should always accept the fact that there will be some cost which I need not allocate. The cost of unused capacity. Today my thinking is whatever is there in accounts, I should load it onto the product or customer. It is not fair. Why should I load that cost onto the customer or product? Right? Here, by dividing by practical capacity, I am not loading it. Right? The other aspect is, look at now, if I use a model like this, it becomes very simple. It is not complex at all. Just go back to previous. Very simple. Can I not make it into an equation? I might have 1,00,000 customers, but very simple. I have a customer who demands normal picking up and dropping, a customer who demands special packing, a customer who demands air shipment in addition. I simply define this as X and this on top of X and this on top of X. It becomes an equation. I can have 1,000,000 customers, but I can easily develop a model. So it isn't complex. This is what we typically do. It need not be complex. Right? It can be simple. We are working backwards. We first estimate, then use an equation to model. Right? Next one. This is something which we have discussed, cost reduction, how the CPM contribute. The first thing is reduce the time and effort required to perform an activity. But the problem is where to focus. Experience suggests that focus on batch level activities, focus on product level activities, not unit. My saving 5 seconds, 10 seconds in cycle time will not improve significantly. But if I change, if I am able to save 2 hours in setup, that is where I can save cost. If I am able to save machining cost due to better design of my mold, I am eliminating an activity. If at the time of designing a product, if I am able to use a material which is not going to corrode, I am removing a subsequent activity in the form of rust preventive coating, and that is how I save costs. So cost saving can come in that activity or by even the previous activity. Right? So where to reduce cost, very important, and the scope is in the design stage and in processes. It can be even from a trial process. And setup is where I can reduce. The next is eliminating unnecessary. This is something which is rampant. See, again, typically some harm comes. We neither imbibe the Japanese fully nor the Americans fully. We are in between the two, typically. Right? The concept comes. Right? They tell, work with your vendor to improve at his site. Excellent. Yes, I will work with my vendor. Audit his facility. Do all this stuff. Then again land it in front of my stores. Put a QC team on it. Then invert it into stores. Then issue. Why? You either work with your vendor or you inspect it when it comes into the factory. If you work with your vendor, then the stopping in front of stores, inverting, then issuing it to shop floor are all activities which have got to be eliminated. It cannot be both ways. You are only increasing your cost, and that is what is meant by eliminating unnecessary activities. Select again design choices. Very simple. Should it be manual or should it be machine based? Should it be on a special purpose machine or should it be on a multi-purpose machine? Should we have a product line or should we have a process line? These are things which have got to be taught upfront. Right? Sharing activities is a very important point. Typically in OEMs we find it. Right? So people tell this standardization is what is meant by sharing activities. Right? Now, how do I drive standardization as an accountant, as a management accountant? How do I push for standardization? Any ideas, sir? Please participate. How do I push for it?
So, there will be a policy.
Not standardizing. Now, how do I push?
The cost center account. Cost.
A customer who demands more customizing should be charged more, logically. So how do I do it? You have your bill of material, right? Can you not take a list of components which are standard, used in multiple models and which are unique to that model? A BOM that contains more unique part numbers, that product should be obviously charged with more cost of sourcing. Is it logical, sir? More the unique part numbers in a BOM, right? It means more customizing. Please do not look at it only as sourcing cost. What I am telling is the entire, look at the number of activities you perform. A request for purchase, right? Then doing all the audits, placing of order, following up, one more part number, master creation, so much more production planning, stocking up, space occupation, right? So should we not use that? Are we using it? Very simple base we use. Sourcing, spread it on metal consumption. A product costs more, charge it with more metal cost. Is it logical? Again, we will be undercosting some Overcosting. Finally, redeploy unused resources. Finally, see, without this fifth point, you can never cut costs. Very simple. This is the heart of EPM, I would tell, at least from the costing side. What is redeployment? I will give a classic example. Again, I am very critical of these quality people. They are the blue-eyed boys in any company, right? So I have a quality department, let us say April 23. It's a newly established plant. The department process quality team, the cost is 5 lakhs, comprising of manpower and depreciation. Mainly 2 elements. Now, since it's a newly established plant and there are a lot of inspections happening, process is not stable, therefore quality is super busy. So let us say during that month they do some 50,000 inspections. And I as a management accountant doing ABIS, I tell I will use number of inspections as the driver of cost for quality. So I have 5 lakh cost divided by 50,000 inspections. What is my cost per inspection, sir? 10 rupees. Now typically what happens in companies, I will tell next. During the year you are planning for some audit. IS, TS, OSHAs, name it, all companies do it. Right? So lot of documentation work is happening. Then our process team tells, sir, process we have stabilized. So the quality, the defects, the rejections have come down. We can now move on to a sample inspection regimen. Very good. In between the audits happen, audits are cleared, lot of documentation done, the company is painted, all that is done, right? Typically what happens? You go to a plant, you can smell that a quality audit has happened, right? Everything is there in its place. So what happens next? Our management is very happy. Quality have done a great job. So I add one more person. The team has worked very well. Give them a 10% increment. So next April 24, the quality cost department now is 6 lakhs. But we have unfortunately now, unfortunate for quality, we have moved to a sample inspection, right? And now the number of inspection despite increase in turnover etc. has come down from 50,000 to let us say 10,000. Now what is the cost of inspection? 6 lakhs by 10,000. Has cost increased or reduced? If rejections have been reduced, you have moved from a 100% to a sampling regimen. Should cost of performing the activity not reduce? Why is it not reduced? It can never reduce. This is what I told, is putting the cart before the horse. Right? You cannot operate in silos. See, this is something which management isn't aware of. Many people think quality has done a good job, give 10%. There are companies where process quality, this is not some imagined case, this is a live case which we have, right? And this is what happens in how can you reduce cost? When your cost of inspection has actually gone up for doing a better job. So what is the key to reducing cost? Now how do we reduce? I have got to redeploy the resources in quality. There are companies where we go, we find the CMO machine. Most of you have, I call it the white elephant, Airavat. Kept in an air-conditioned room. It's a prestige issue. Most companies should have 1 or 2. There are companies with multiple CMOs. It is hardly used. Coordinate measuring machines, right? For AC environment, 1 person permanently put there, right? And it is hardly used. Nature is like that. Unless customer demands, we don't use it. But what happens is, then of course manpower. So the same company, quality vendor side or customer side, they will be recruiting people. Now how will cost reduce? Activity at quality. Should I not be redeploying them? Instead of adding 1 more person? So cost will never reduce. Quality has improved but cost has not reduced. Because cost will not reduce unless you redeploy the people who have been freed up by performing the activity better. This is the crux of the problem as to why none of the cost reduction initiatives work in companies. Right? So, as paradigm shift, the behavioral component is what? The resistance that we face, right? After all, we know what it costs. That is the first line of defense. If you tell no, this way of reporting everything as a percentage of sales, it's very defective. No, this has been done for eons. I am just following what my seniors did. Why at all break from tradition? Accountants, we are very conservative, right? Why break from tradition? Somebody has done. You observe the final annual report of any company. It is a number of Excel sheets. You fill up the data, automatically it will populate. In days, IFRS has changed, but the way it is populated, it has been working the same way for years together. Be it the MIS monthly or the annual closure of account. So somebody has designed something, why should I change? Somebody has designed the inventory valuation, why should I change? This is what is preventing real change happening in the finance world. This is something which we have to break if we have got to be effective and not just efficient. Right? I end with this. What is left hand side, what is the right hand side? Physical, mental strength. I call this external reporting, financial accounting and audit. Right? Very good. 6-pack, 8-pack, we look beautiful. And nowadays corporates have developed green sustainability. Change the color of the report to green. Add more green color in annual report. How does it aid sustainability? God only knows. We borrow blindly the Western concepts. Right? It's all good. But then for what the top management needs is not this. This is good for the outsider, for the shareholder, for the lender. We are continuing to use this for this, and that is where the root problem lies. Transform ourselves. Unless we do that, no amount of change in systems can happen. We have got to move out of our comfort zone, get to the shop floor, get to the place where action actually happens. And that is the art of EPM from an accountant